Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast for Black Women Connect Vancouver. Girl, you know it. So I'm the founder of Black Women Connect Vancouver, which started in 2017. And Black Women Connect Vancouver is a collective of women who come to inspire, empower, and leverage our strengths and embrace our diverse experiences. It is a community where we can build meaningful relationships and celebrate the beauty of our Black womanhood. I hope that you enjoy it. Welcome back, everybody. So excited to have our guest today. Today we're going to be talking about boundaries. And so let's start. Introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Chitinthi Tembo. My full name's Chitinthi, but I prefer Tinthi. I am the co-founder of Origin Papers, which is a storytelling outlet that helps people connect through stories, and the co-founder of BIPOC-CA, which is a newly formed creative association in the city, as well as being a recent board member on Pace Society's board. So yeah, that's a little snippet about me.
And you're Zambian.
Yes, I'm half Zambian and half Zimbabwean. That's really key to note here.
Yes.
I'm very proud.
Proud Zambian.
Calm down.
It's okay. You're still in the southern part of Africa.
Like I'm third wheeling. I'm primarily the one, and then y'all come in. Anyway,
I'm primarily the one.
Wow, this is what South Africans do. Forget about the rest.
You know.
They think they're the only
Don't
ones.
forget about the rest of you.
I'm pretty sure
that
we're all in this together.
We were freedom fighters for countries together.
Oh, all of a sudden there was Zambian camaraderie. Then all of a sudden I'm being above.
Yeah.
Y'all were being above.
No, we were just recognizing, our
Recognition.
patriotic ways.
Yes,
Anyway.
it matters.
So since we're going to be talking about boundaries today, we're going to focus on family structures and for boundaries, but then also our relationships in general, and then also working relationships. So tell us a little bit more about your family structure. How did you grow up? Did you grow up here? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's really funny that you asked that. I tend to find what I thought was a strange upbringing to be very true now that I've conducted more investigations throughout my life with the relationships I've formed. I guess I grew up in a somewhat non-conventional household. My mother was 24 years younger than my father, which, in the basic normalized state of everyone putting stigmas against everything would term her a gold digger, but I would argue against that completely, because it was really more that both my parents were quite established, very keen on education, both worked for the World Health Organization, which is where they met. And so it really had nothing to do with that besides love, to be quite frank, because I would ask my mom questions about it growing up, kind of wondering why the optics of our family didn't resemble those of my peers at school, because, it was nuclear family vibes, which we had, but then my father lived in Zambia and my mom lived in Zimbabwe, and I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. And my father would come to visit once a month or so, and they were still married. They were actively married, actively in love with each other, but living in separate countries. So that set me as an anomaly right off the bat, because all my friends had both of their parents at home, and because we were in diplomatic circles, it tended to be that the fathers were working and most of my friends' moms weren't working, and they were stay-at-home moms and doing their mom duties. So it was really just striking that my mom worked in the first place.
Yeah.
And so that set a foundation for a lot of questions, and I've always been one to ask lots of questions. So I was like, so tell me about this. Why this guy? What does this mean? So I would say that foundation within itself kind of set a precedent for how they raised me. They took a very diplomatic approach. I say this by saying, like, if my mom sends me an email today, it literally says, "Hi, Tinthi, I hope this email finds you well. Herewith, please find." And it's like, this is my mom sending this kind regards at the end of the email. And she's been sending me emails like this since I was a child. Even my father, when he used to email me, same kind of vibe. Just so you know, he's passed away now. But it was strange. So that kind of dynamic, that diplomatic approach, just was infused in how they set boundaries and taught me my values and what have you. I would say there was very strict boundaries set from the onset. Like, you know, I kind of lived a somewhat socially imprisoned life because my mom was very particular about who I could spend time with, and there was a lot of family politics from her side of the family, so she chose to distance me more from my cousins. So that boundary was set, but also meant that I wasn't really spending time with my cousins, my aunties, my uncles, just because they had differences. So that estrangement in their relationship created this very formal boundary for my development of the connection with my family members. So same thing went with my friends. It was very particular when I could spend time with them, and so on and so forth. And also just down to how my parents interacted with me. I would say, like, for me, I was flabbergasted when I first moved to Canada, so-called Canada, because I found people's parents were completely overstepping in my perspective. I was like, they do what? I can't believe that. Like, this idea of if you do something wrong and then your parent can come into your room and read your journals or ask to see your phone and read your messages, that's completely unacceptable in my mind. We just didn't have that kind of dynamic. My mother said, "I will never touch any of your things. I'll never read anything. I'm setting this foundation that we have trust first before that overstep." So I knew never to touch her journals, her phones. I didn't even have the desire to read anything because she met me 50-50 in that way, and never just came into my space to explore or do research. She would just ask me. So that's how I understand forming relationships now. You know, there's certain topics that need to be discussed. By setting those boundaries, I like to set them initially upon meeting someone, letting them know what I can and can't do within the relationship. I'm not a big texter, and when I do text, it's because we're close to each other, but also still, I might not express myself. I'm not very emotive in the text, but if you know me, I'm really like expressive. So I set that boundary initially and say, you know, I don't like messaging a lot, and don't be surprised if I don't answer often. Like, it has nothing to do with what I think about you. I just find that dynamic important.
That's quite interesting. I think similarly my parents weren't investigatory in that sense. Like, I had journals, I had diaries, I wrote a lot when I was younger. But I also think that there was that level of trust and that level of kind of I'll call it now common decency, but I don't want to be like other people to misconstrue it and be like, oh, well, I guess I'm not being decent, but you're kind of not. But, you know, it's really interesting where the investigation took place. The investigation didn't take place in like my personal belongings or my room or anything like that. I didn't ever feel like that was taken away from me in terms of privacy, but in terms of like asking my siblings and like asking for somebody to be quote unquote a spy or whatever the case is, and just to have like a lookout essentially for them. And I played that part, and I used to tell on my siblings and stuff like that, and I thought I was doing the right thing because of the way that I was told, like I was protecting them and they probably didn't know what they were doing, or like, you know, my mom had to take care of them, and so I would be the one to be her eyes when she was gone. And I think we buy into being the person who breaks the silence or the whistleblower, but don't actually know how detrimental it is to forming our own relationships with the people that we whistleblow on, right? And so in my regard, I was younger than my siblings who I was telling on, and so that casted a different light on me, but I think they understood, and we were still able to form a really good relationship in that sense. But what happens then, you know, because I feel sometimes that there is that removed sense and there's an expectation for you to be forthcoming with your parents if you have that separation and that trusting boundary. How has that worked in terms of your relationship? Are you as forthcoming with your mom? Do you wish that she could be more forthcoming with other things? Do you feel that same way as well? Do you feel like a little bit of overstepping could have helped the negotiation of being opened?
You know, I think about that often, and I would say because I was basically dispatched, as I like to term it, across the world, and lost that initial bond to like be raised by your parent, your guardianship, like that's where you've learned all your formal primary socialization, and then at 14 that's just severed just like that, and you're across the world. I would say our relationship when I was younger wasn't very strong at all, because I just felt like, you know, despite how open that seems, it meant she was calling every 10 minutes when I was at the house, being like, so what are you doing now? And I was like, this is not giving me enough breathing room whatsoever. And I do have siblings from my dad's side, and grew up with two of them from the age of 9, I would say. So the forthcoming nature, I would say, presented itself once the distance had been really instated, and it's like, okay, now you will not be close to each other anytime soon. So it meant, and I saw what that looked like, actually, because I lived with not a very good family when I first moved out here. And I was having a lot of problems with them. The mom used to shout at me, make me clean all these things, a new imported slave, to be honest. And I didn't share that with my mom because I was fearful of upsetting her or making her worried, you know, because we were so far apart. But that meant I was now completely becoming a recluse in terms of sharing this painful experience that I'm going through, which she could have played a part in helping me through sooner had I communicated that. So I would say it definitely developed over time, but there was also that fear because, you know, coming from an African family, there's always a fear. They want you to share. They're like, let's be open, let's share. Then you share and they're like, I'm going to whoop your ass. Like, you know? So it's like, should I share? Should I share? But then you eventually, like, I think the distance made me feel more comfortable in sharing because the reprimandment would just be less. It's just more over the phone, and it's like, well, we can deal with that the next time we see each other, but because we only see each other once a year, you're going to make the most out of it. So let's
so you forget about it.
Exactly. So I think that's how I would find that it's something I grew into. It didn't come naturally whatsoever, even given those foundations. So it did make me question, like, is it as awesome being in this nuclear family where everyone's communicating all the time? Because I still find some of the issues I refer back to relate with a lot of people who grew up with their parents right then and there, and the communication with their siblings. So then it just makes you know over time that there's no perfect family structure whatsoever. Like it's just who's making the most of it. How are you trying to relate to each other, establish a relationship? Are you making an effort and being respectful while doing it, I think.
That's good. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about how you kept boundaries, having to grow up in not a nucleus family, I guess, like your immediate family, and having siblings that were half siblings, and you said you grew up with two of them that you were close to, or you can expand on that. What does that look like in terms of boundaries? Because if you don't grow up with someone, you do develop boundaries of like, well, this is just what our relationship's going to be, right? Like, because someone may be like, well, we didn't grow up together, so I don't be your like sibling in that capacity, but we can know each other from a distance. Or were you that person? How did that work?
So I was really, really keen on having siblings from the minute I popped out of the womb. I was like, so where's my brother? Where's my sister at? They were like, no. So I was aware that I had half siblings from my dad's side. And when I first met my brother, they used to both live in South Africa, the two siblings that I grew up with. And they went to boarding school. So my brother came for a summer holiday, and he was really excited to meet me. It was a great interaction. We had this awesome summer, did these kind of activities that you do with your brother, like play with sticks, sword fights. Like this was gross, but he taught me how to spit far. So we would do like spitting competitions, which during a pandemic is not acceptable. Just keep that in mind.
Don't try it at home.
I know quarantine can get a bit boring, but still take care. And so we had a great kickoff into our relationship. He was really keen on moving to Zimbabwe. My sister, on the other hand, was not having it. I believe, from what I understand, there were preconceived notions kind of instilled within them that when you go to a stepmother, your stepmother is evil, she will treat you badly, she won't love you, especially within a context within African cultures, the children from another woman, especially, it's like a very
Those
difficult...
are not your children.
Like... So... my mom didn't have that perspective. She loved my father so much that she was like, I want to adopt your children and raise them here. So we had my brother, who was very excited to integrate and become like a nuclear-ish family. And then my sister, who was just like, no, it's nice to see you. We will cohabitate. And we do share the same surname, but that's as far as it will go. So the boundary was right there. The fact that we were half-blooded relation was our boundary. And it lasted the entire time we grew up together. And she went on to be a teenager. Like, we had our moments where we would have the sisterly love, but it was timed. Like, she set the boundaries very strictly. I could only hang out with her for a certain number of hours. And then when that time was up, it's like, oh, Tinthi, you need to leave now. I'm doing me. And she termed it as being more of like a teenage behavior, and that we were going to connect more when we were older because we're so far apart in age. So I'll count on these moments where we could spend time together. So I would say that like there was just boundaries throughout, like just even the terminology of certain things. Like created that boundary. It was unspoken. And sometimes I feel like that can have more damage because you have these ideas of what it means to engage in that relationship with your siblings, and you're excited, we'll play games, we'll do this. Meanwhile, they're like looking at the time, being like, when is this little girl gonna go away, you know? So that ended up affecting me. And when we headed into our adult years, they moved to Victoria, went to UVic. I was living in Halifax, Nova Scotia, so I'd go visit for holidays. And our dynamic completely changed. We were suddenly friends now and hanging out all the time. And they said it was because I was older. So I don't know, you know, I've been asking these same questions to myself all the time. Like, how do you engage in the relationship when the boundary is like pre-inscribed into the relationship? Like, the understanding of that relationship already has the boundary, and you're the character just being plopped in and navigating that space. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm still wondering within my family dynamic how to engage in breaking down those boundaries with the other siblings. That age gap completely is the boundary, you know. I'm the little baby, I'm the youngest, and there's a little bit of a feud from that because they wanted to be the youngest. So we just have a complete clash. We don't talk. I added one of my sisters on Facebook. She didn't accept the friend request for 7 years, so I canceled it. That was my understanding of what our relationship was. So yeah, you know, it's up in the 7 years. And I was like, okay. And we had seen each other within those 7 years, and it was just becoming very clear, like our interaction face to face is not even short of being diplomatic at all. Like, it's just two people being in the same space with the same surname, and we can speak to each other cordially, and that's as far as it goes. But even something as superficial as accepting a friend request, that whole dynamic is infused into that, and then it sends a bigger message. That is the boundary. It'll go as far as just sharing the same last name. So you know.
So how were you able to start working through that? So like you said, you asked a lot of questions. Was it like, okay, let me take the next step, like ask more family about it? Or you're like, I'm going to go get counseling, or I'm going to, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to journal. Like, what was your, like, okay, this is going to be my boundary and working through it?
I think that's a very good question. I became very enraged over the years, trying to feel like I was the only one putting effort into building those connections. And then 18 came around. I was about 17 or 18. And then I was so furious. I felt like it was preventing me from being the best version of myself. I could feel that. I used to clench my fists all the time, so I'd be like pushing my fingernails into my palms. It didn't really like dig that hard, but it was like something I could feel all the time. And then I used to get osteopathy for my back, and my osteopath also had a title counseling. So I was like, oh, if I ask you questions or talk about my problems, you'll keep it confidential? And he was like, yes. And so I was like, okay, well, I have so much to tell you.
Let me tell you.
I'm like, let's open up this chapter. So we get talking and start realizing that, yes, I have trapped a lot of the result of severe boundary setting into anger because it's preventing me from building those connections. So I was like, I need to move past this because it's going to affect how I develop bonds with new people I meet. And I didn't want that to affect me. There's a lot of, preconceived notions about what family is supposed to be and what it means. But the way I look at it now, given what I've just told you, is like you can make your own family, you can build it, you know? And so I definitely feel like I have a family and siblings and everything, just not in the blood
way.
Yeah, exactly. So I start counseling and I'm like, you know, explaining this whole childhood, and the end kind of result that came from that was being encouraged to tell my siblings, my parents, of what I had been going through over the years, because I did feel senses of abandonment issues and loneliness from that disconnection. Also, being dispatched across the world really hit home in here. So then I was able to address this face to face, but I know that a lot of people wouldn't be even able to have that strength or that courage within themselves to voice what's going on. But for me, I knew I wouldn't be able to move forward as an individual without speaking my truth, because I just didn't like feeling that way anymore. So yeah, the counseling helped a lot, addressed it directly face to face with my parents, and that was a big deal. But I've always had what they call a loud mouth, so I've always just been there like, so I have something to talk about. You know, I had some problems with this dispatch, tell me how you felt. You know, so that really helped me, because we were able to be honest, you know, and really start that process. And I was able to have that dialogue and say, so this is how this action affected me. And this is a result of this. And it's, you know, manifested these kind of emotions within me. So then we're having that dialogue, but I know that it's not possible. But it came with also them sending me across the world. They had to be open to receiving that, because it's like, yeah, when you send a child at 14 across the world by themselves, they're gonna have something, some feelings that come from that. So if you're not open to hearing that there would be some effects, they're not just going to grow up and become this educated person that you are comparing to all your friends who also sent children across the world. So I think counseling 100%, you know, especially within our Black community, and as Black women especially, I find we usually suppress that and can get over it. We're strong enough. But I really, really suggest to anyone who's listening, like, it's a lot to get there, to get to that step, but that's a type of strength to be able to identify that you need to seek counsel on a topic, and you should feel a sense of endearment for even feeling confident enough to say you need that. So by sharing this story, I just hope that it makes others feel comfortable with seeking counsel.
I think it definitely will. For me, because what came to me when you were talking about the hard boundaries that are set, I think I had to learn how to set hard boundaries, and not necessarily to keep the person out, but to keep myself from continuing to hurt myself by letting them treat me in that way. And so I had to start learning how to separate myself, but I still carry a lot of guilt around the severing of relationships because of the dynamic that I was talking about in the previous episode of being the helper, being the one who's listening, being the one who's, you know, that pillar of strength, that kind of guiding in terms of logic. And even now in my friendships that are not successful, I feel really bad for letting people go, even if it's for my own well-being. I just feel like, you know, what if I was that person to show them that grace and that compassion that would help them, that would would change them? You know, what if I am the saving grace, but then I have to take myself out of it, you know, and stop trying to save people and stop trying to help people and work on myself as an individual. And I like that counseling allowed you to see your parents as individual and to hold them accountable for their individual actions, and then how that perpetuated itself in the dynamic that you have with like being a child. I think that's a really big step to do, is to start looking at everybody as an individual, even little children. Like obviously you're not going to look at a little kid and be like, you're an individual, so you have to clean and take care of yourself, and the kid is 5, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying you need to cultivate them as an individual and then treat them in relation to everything around them. I think we do the reverse, where we're family before we're people, and it's like, no, I'm a person and you're a family. I could hate you, right? But we can still be family. The family title doesn't leave us because we're blood related, but it doesn't mean that the dynamic of our relationship is going to be in whatever the category says it has to be. So that's a...
You know, actually, what you just said is really a poignant point to note, because of the fact that in books and stories, how it's been scripted of how your mom or dad is supposed to behave is what was so damaging for me, and what made me realize I had to look at them as individuals. Because when I kept on asking, how could your parents send you away, there was nothing which made sense. They're always telling me how much they love me and how proud they are of me, but then from a distance. So I was like, okay, we're not going to stick to these titles. We need to look at folks as individuals at times. Yeah,
no, that's a good point. I think for me, like, I like the point where you said just before then about like being that pillar, and I feel like I am that person. It's always like that strong friend for a lot of people in my life, and I don't mind being that person. Like, I'm not saying I don't mind it. I really do appreciate it, but I think that for me, when I experienced something so traumatic in my life, and my psyche changed, and I wasn't available to be that person for you, because even when I went through that car crash and I came back, there was a lot of things going on in my different friends' lives that were very drastic changes in their lives that I just couldn't be there for you. Like, I couldn't. And like, there's moments where we were supposed to like all do a hangout thing, and I'd drop out like last minute, and I was like, sorry, I can't come. Like, I just emotionally cannot be in your presence. And I think that was a really hard process for my friends to see me in that state, because you're just expected to just always get over things. You know, when you're the resilient one, you can go through anything in life, and it's like, oh, she'll always have a happy face. Oh, she'll always look confident, and she'll always walk through life, whatever, because she's so resilient, she's strong. And it's like, I heard that word so much in my life. It's like, at some point you're like, I'm not though. Like, in this moment, I'm not. Accept that part of me. And I think for me, I had to learn to draw boundaries with people in that area, because I had to be like, listen, today I'm not that person that you're expecting me to be. And I think that was a really hard thing for me to also start being like, because you know you are resilient, you know you are that strong person, but when you can't be that, it's hard to also tell people and be like, okay, today I'm not, but for you also feel guilty because you're so like, you kind of get into that role of, I can fix everything for everyone, but I can't fix it for myself in this moment. And that's such a very challenging thing. But then it's like, how do I create boundaries for myself to heal? But also create boundaries that my friends need to realize, like, I'm also an individual in this moment. Like, see me for where I'm at in this, like, moment. It may take a day, it may take a week, it may take years. Like, I don't know. And I think it's like, where do we give ourselves grace with that? And especially as Black women, we are always seen as the overly strong person. Like, you can take anything, you know? And it's like, just take any of the pain, like, it doesn't matter. And it's like the moment you say, like, hey, listen, today I'm crossing, like, I'm putting that boundary, and be like, I'm not okay, I'm like, I need to be in this place, or I need to take this boundary and be like, I can't hang out with you today. Like, accept that, don't question it, just accept it as like, she needs this time. So have you had like stories like that with other like friendships or like relationships where you're like, let me just, like, either toxic or not, because that's a whole different topic, but you can mix it in.
Because you don't always break up toxic the relationships, right? Even the good ones are...
Yep.
I mean, you sparked a whole topic on its own that can be its own podcast, but Something I've done in my research for my minor was I took a course on the history of Black women in the Americas, and Black respectability is an incredibly huge topic within scholarship from Black feminist scholars. And it is exactly what you described, is that there are these notions, preconceived notions, that we are these warriors as Black identifying women that can just withstand everything that everyone else cannot. So that this idea, these assumptions that you'll be able to get over it, or you can be present because you've always been able to do that. And then the day you're sad, it's shocking to people.
Yeah.
And I would say when it comes to even when you're going through a hard time, that taps into it based off of what you're talking about. It's like people assume a boundary that if you say you're sad, that you don't need to be checked up on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, excuse
It's
me,
so
like
true.
what kind of friendship is this?
Yes.
When you're going through something, you expect me
Yes.
to call you. You even wonder why I didn't send you a text message.
Show up at the doorstep, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then for me, it's like, oh, I thought you were going to be okay.
I thought you just needed time alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I guess that's what this is. And navigating that, especially within the context of this land, I find that that's a reoccurring thing that happens. And it especially happens with non-Black friends. And it's like only when, that's why I feel most comfortable being around other Black folks, because it's like we don't have to explain ourselves, and if we are feeling something painful, but then I think it also comes within our own relationships as well. We think we have these strengths because it's being perpetuated and imposed on us. So in friendships, I've just had to honestly say, I'm going through a hard time. I won't be able to speak to you for a while because of how I've been met with that type of resistance of actually being a decent human being. Because if you think you shouldn't call or text me, some of my closest friends do this to me. And they're like, we thought you had this person there for you. And it's like, excuse me.
Why are you counting the people I have?
Yeah, like that doesn't work. You still matter. I've been calling you. Oh, well, you should have texted me. And it's like, what? That's going to make you understand the severity of the situation.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's interesting because it was the same for me, like in that way where right after, like, when it happened, like for us, like my family and my sister was here, and like the people that even showed up for my sister, I wasn't actually even expecting those people to show up. I thought like other people would be there. And like there was one person who was one of my closest friends, and she sent me an email. It's an email I don't use, right? Like one of my closest friends. And I got back and I was like, how come, I texted her, I was like, how come you never checked up on me? I literally died. And like, and she just is like, well, I sent you an email. Like, and that was the moment. And when we had a sit down conversation, she started crying and had the nerve to say, well, I was like, I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry. And in that moment, and there was other people too. I definitely have been like, I had to like cut so many people out of my life. And the people I didn't think were going to step up, stepped up. And that to me, when I was like, because loyalty is a big thing for me. It's huge. And I was like, if you're not there in the moment of something that serious, I don't want you there in my success. And whatever success looks like. Not that I need to be like famous, but like
sending me an email.
Sending your like one of your closest friends an email when she's in the hospital, like to me, I just was like, my mind was blown. And that's when I came to realize that it's like, not everyone's going to be there for you in those moments. And it's like, when do you set up that boundary? Because how many times did I forgive you for certain things and certain actions that you did to me that where you were going through and you didn't treat me properly? And I was still there. there. But then it's like, anything happens to me, it's like, I sent you an email, and then that's when I had to be like, I need to start cutting people out of my life. Like, and I don't really have like people super close to me that like that. And so when that happened, I really had to evaluate. I was like, if a person can just say like, I sent you an email when you like
go through something like that, I was like, what else can someone else do to you? Yeah. And that's when I had to be like, not everyone's going to be there for you. And boundaries, and that's when I started learning boundaries, and not to be like apologetic about it. Because I think before I was super apologetic because I'm like so loyal. I'm like, give people the benefit of the doubt. Now I'm just like, if loyalty is just not there, then I'm like, we can't be friends, like we can be business friends, we can be cordial friends, we can be casual friends, because I'll never be like, I'll never talk eventually about you. I won't be like, you know what I mean? Like, I won't talk maliciously about you and drag you in the streets. Like, we'll just have a different relationship, and that's it. And just be okay with that. Like, because that's the boundary now I have with you. Yeah.
You're right. It is when my dad passed away that happened. My best friend again left me on scene. They had shown that red change. Yeah. Left me on red for a whole summer and answered and said, "Oh, I was working for my father. I was very busy.
It ends up
I
being
saw
about
your message," and I was like, no. That's when I learned you could just cut people out with no like unapologetic. So it's real.
It's so real. And I've seen in other people's lives, it's like when there's a huge life change that happens, whether it's like, death or whatever, or weddings. Woo, the amount of weddings I've seen where like friends have just like broken up about things. It's just like, it's crazy. People make things about themselves, and in that moment you have to make that decision of like, I'm setting this boundary and we're just not moving forward, and that's okay. And before I used to like kind of feel bad, but like no, it is what it is. Like you get to the age too where you're like, is this the person I want for the next 10 years of my life if you can't even be here for that? Like there's gonna be other life things that we're all gonna go through that are traumatic or not.
And people are not scarce. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
It sucks to have to start from scratch to make a best friend, but like I can cultivate a best friend relationship.
And it doesn't even have to be a best friend, right? It's like there's still other people you can be close friends with.
It's so wild.
Yeah, like even with your partner, right?
Yeah, you helped me with that recently, actually. Being able to like not feel like I hold this responsibility to respond to somebody or to give them a reason as to why I'm cutting them off as well. And so I think, the tagline for this podcast episode is nobody is above blocking and being cut off because we're going to cut you off. Tinthi, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a blast to have you here with us.
It's a pleasure. I've wanted to be on this couch with the both of you. So.
I know, because we've like recently just like, we've made friends with you like in different capacity. I think like I was on one of your podcasts too, and then I was like, oh, okay, who's this girl randomly messaging? And then we finally met up, and then I saw that you were hanging out with Plus, and I was like, wait, what? You know her too? And I'm like, who's this girl? Just like finding her way, and then she's like, I'm an honorary Black Women Connect like staff member.
I self-invited myself. I was like, I'm an honorary member, so just so all of you know, I'm an honorary member.
We'll have like a new page on our website.
It's her highlight.
Yes. Just Tinthi's face there. Yes.
We'll start a new page for honorary members. Awesome.
But yes, it's been a pleasure.
It's been awesome. COVID distance.
Cheers. Love it.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. It's always amazing to get an opportunity to chat with these lovely ladies. So if you're looking to follow us off of the podcast and you're looking to catch up with some of the content that we have, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube, all at Black Women Connect Vancouver. And we also have a website for you at blackwomenconnectvancouver.com, which is where you can sign up for our mailing list and our newsletter so you can keep updated with our growth and all of the other events that we have planned for you. Catch you later. Bye.